Well, could we have witnessed a possible NBA Finals preview in the desert on Sunday? Didn't turn out in the Sixers' favor, but a measuring stick nonetheless. Welcome to the Sixers Talk podcast, brought to you by Wilmington University, WilmU Works, Danny Pommells, Noah Levick, and Ben Berry here. And Noah, if that was a possible NBA Finals preview, could we also be anticipating a possible Eastern Conference Finals preview Tuesday at the Wells Fargo Center? We're kind of sandwiched here in between some great games as we bring you this podcast. And much like Noah, those games hang in the balance based upon the health and consistency of Joel Embiid and James Harden. That game Sunday in Phoenix swung with Joel Embiid on the bench nursing an ankle injury, and really spoke to the fact that his health, and as we all know, how he goes, so goes the 76ers. And the game swung there. Even though the Sixers did bring it back within a point, it swung there with Joel Embiid on the bench. I guess not much to make of that, but facts are facts, huh?
Absolutely, yeah. It's unfortunate for the Sixers because I think we had a stretch for a while where Joel Embiid's health wasn't on many people's radar, and now back-to-back games, I think you could classify him as experiencing injury scares. To be fair, I think him sitting was when he typically would have, and the Sixers just didn't fare well in those second half minutes after somewhat miraculously outscoring Phoenix by 11 with DeAndre Jordan on the court in the first half. The highlight of that stretch was probably one of those never seen this before plays from Danny Green, where he missed the corner three.
Only he would pull that off. Only he would even attempt that. Like, you would never think Furkan or Shake would like do something like that.
Yeah, Furkan might be the number two.
Maybe. Right.
Next up shots, but Danny Green put up two corner threes within 12 seconds and 10 seconds, made half of them. So that was great. Tobias Harris played really well during that stretch, and the Sixers built a lead as large as 15 points against a 60-win team, which is a big deal. And I think ultimately what cost them this game is right after Embiid went back in there, Phoenix, immediately went on a run. And that's just a team where when they're close or when they have a lead, they're just so tough to beat. And I think basketball-wise, they have answers to whatever you throw at them. But then even just toughness and physicality and just finding ways to win, there aren't any better teams in this league than the Phoenix Suns. And you talk about potential NBA Finals matchups. Yet again, I think there's no one better than the Suns. I mean, after that game, they have 14 more wins than any team in the Eastern Conference. Like, I don't think you can exaggerate how good a basketball team that is. So it's a frustrating loss for the Sixers. It's disappointing. It's familiar that, again, not faring well during a crucial period with Embiid on the bench, contributes heavily to a loss. But I do think a huge thing to consider here is just that the Phoenix Suns are a tremendous team that probably is going to have a great shot to win a title. And, Monty Williams should, I think, win Coach of the Year. And tough team to beat, and the Sixers weren't quite good enough on the final game of their road trip to do so.
And when you size it up even more, it's partly like the Suns coming off the Western Conference Championship last season, falling short to the Bucks team that the Sixers are going to play on Tuesday. And anytime, any place Devin Booker sees a Sixers jersey, I imagine he's at the supermarket, like seeing dudes in Sixers jersey and like sky hooking, apples into his basket against them or something crazy. Cause he just is, as you outlined in your three observations on NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com, trash talking, hitting baskets early, late. The threes were dropping. Obviously you can point to any of them, but I think there was one he hit in Shake Milton's eye where he pump faked and Shake closed the distance and he still all netted it right in his face. So, a virtuoso 25-year-old, we all know, but just to see him do his thing consistently against the 76ers team time and time again is really crazy. And it's just Chris Paul's second game back coming from injury, and they just still are clicking on all cylinders. And obviously a point to prove after falling short of the championship last season, putting everybody on notice that they are, as you said, the best team in the league.
It looks like that. I mean, before Paul's return, they were on a 6-game winning streak, and now they've extended that to 8 with him back in the lineup. Bridges has obviously become even better defensively, and another former Sixer technically former Sixer, had a nice contribution yesterday. Landry Shamet, 12 points off the bench, and some of those were key ones in that stretch you mentioned in the second half. So, yeah, great basketball team. This was Booker's second consecutive 35-point outing against the Sixers, and it seemed like in that first quarter he couldn't miss a shot. And the Sixers, I think it was just disappointing that there were no ways to immediately stem the tide there, and they fed into it a bit with yet again allowing him some easy points in transition, and that seeming to fuel him a little bit more. But whenever you play the Phoenix Suns, there's usually a large tip your cap element to the game, and I think you do have to acknowledge that and kind of take a step back here and recognize that not many people have ways to beat the Suns.
If we break it down even further, St. Phoenix is a really good team. The Sixers did not play their best basketball, and not probably because of just the individual efforts. And you could point to some exact places, and we'll try to do that. But if we go game to game and we look at the way James Harden played in the first half of the Clippers and then the way he played here really in the entirety of the game, he just didn't have the carryover that you might have expected from having such a fantastic game against LA, at least in the early going of the game. And, Suns team, definitely a ferocious team. They switched up from man, the zone, and none of it seemed to a lot of it seemed to disrupt the Sixers. None of it seemed to work in their favor. We have 8 games left here. He's trying to work through some of these kinks of who he is, his identity, when he shoots, when he passes. And I do not want to see him turn down open shots. Like, if he's open, and okay, statistically, he might not be the best 3-point shooter, but as shooters shoot. So the rhythm and the opportunities that he gains from taking open shots and seeing them fall or, not passing up those open looks, I don't know if the risk reward kind of pays off as much if he turns down the open shot to pass it to someone else who then maybe doesn't get as a great a look as him, but it may have been the right pass in the situation. But I want to see him shoot the ball more. I mean, I don't have a problem kind of going down with the ship, so to speak. If he's putting up, 12 threes, I probably would be more inclined with him shooting them than other guys. But he has struggled from the outside at times, and it seems that gets in his head a little bit, and he does turn into more of a passer somewhat or a driver to the basket. But the calls weren't going his way, and that little bit of indecisiveness, you can see him still trying to think the game in some instances. What did you make of that, Noah?
Yeah, I think all those observations are spot on. The play that stood out to me yesterday as an illustration of some of that was one of those first half stretches where DeAndre Ayton was in some foul trouble, and the Sixers loved the Embiid versus Bismack-Biyombo matchup. So they were just trying to get him touches on every single possession, and that was highly effective in the first quarter when Embiid put up 15 points. But then less so in the second, and it started to feel a little forced and a little excessive. And there was one play where Embiid and Harden ran a pick and pop, and to me it looked like James Harden had a lane right into the paint, and instead of accepting that, he kicked the ball out to Embiid. And sure, Embiid got an open 3 and ended up missing it, and obviously the play looks a lot better in retrospect if he knocks that down. But to me was just an example of being a little too accommodating to his teammates and a little too passive in terms of wanting to make everyone else better, as opposed to recognizing that he enhances the Sixers overall when he steps on the gas and focuses on attacking. But I think the first half of the Clippers game was the blueprint for James Harden, the aggressive, paint pressuring player that the Sixers would like to see. Not just production-wise, 25 points is obviously a nice half for Harden, albeit against an undermanned Clippers squad, but he puts up 8 threes and he attempts 9 free throws. And for so long, threes and free throws have been the foundation of his game. And just the fact that he's a high volume guy in both those categories, and those shots tend to correspond with him being an aggressive offensive player, of course. Not much time to get consistency, to figure this stuff out. And then the other angle of it, of course, is the physical one, and just what his capacity is and what it will be regarding his explosiveness and the ability to put people in spots where they've got to foul him, and the ability to blow by guys. All really important questions that are still very much lingering.
Ty Lue with the Captain Obvious comment of the year before the Clippers game, talking about Joel Embiid and James Harden's prowess at the free throw line, and how if these guys didn't have as many free throw attempts as they did, they wouldn't be the scorers they were. I mean, I kind of get where he was going, but just a weird criticism, like trying to eliminate the free throws from the game. What he was trying to say, I kind of understand, but it just didn't come out the right way. It definitely sounded like a bit of hate. But he seems to have like a good relationship with those guys. And, you see them chatting during the game and things like that. But, you mentioned Harden's free throws, and it made me think about Ty Lue and that comment that so many people, hopped on and criticized him about. But kind of stupid. No, that's a weird comment. Like, are you taking free throws out of the game? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, I think people obviously fixated on like part of the quote, and I don't think Ty Lue's tone or point at all was trying to be disrespectful or to denigrate the success of two players he considers great. But yeah, it's a bit of an odd observation, because obviously you can score points in a lot of ways in basketball, and free throws are an efficient way to do so. And the Sixers happen to have two guys who draw a lot of free throws and make a ton of them. So
it's like he's trying to say like they're not really getting fouled as much as they do or something, and don't deserve as many trips to the
perhaps line. Yeah. I mean, I think that's common with a bunch of opponents. They're frustrating players to guard, and just as a coach, like, you hate giving up free points fundamentally, and you hate seeing your players get in foul trouble too. I was a little bit encouraged in the first half, just that Harden drew 2 pivotal fouls. Like, he got the second on Ayton, which forced him to sit a little earlier than he otherwise would have, and Embiid capitalized on that. And then he got the third on Booker late in the second quarter. I think ideally you hope he can do that sort of stuff in addition to, of course, getting free points for himself. And you hope that can be a postseason asset for the Sixers, but the consistency certainly has yet to be there, and the Sixers don't have much time to turn that around.
Tyrese Maxey didn't play his best game, although he did hit a couple timely buckets when the Sixers needed them on that run to come back from trailing. But, it is a game of runs, as Tyrese said previously. In the NBA, the Sixers give up this lead. I believe it was 15 points against the Suns. And it's interesting that, I talked about this in the previous podcast. I want to see Tyrese show up when James doesn't. I guess I'm asking a lot. I mean, you got the guy who is the facilitator, and, obviously a guy that Maxey defers to in some ways as far as the playmaking. And then when he's not, playmaking at his best or scoring, I expect Tyrese to emerge, but he seems to have this feel for the game, and he seems to have this knack for, a nose for the ball and a smart, cerebral player who can make the right plays at the right time. So I'm just looking for that switch to turn where we've seen him play well without Joel Embiid and James Harden in the game. And maybe I'm looking for him to be prolific when the chips are down. And I think, we'll definitely come to see if that comes to fruition in the playoffs or how that plays out. But not his best game, but you will hope that, there will be other Sixers to step up and kind of fill that void and maybe will the team a little bit more when they're floundering a bit.
Right. I think the bottom line is he just didn't make some good looks, and he took 10 threes, which probably wouldn't have happened over a several week span his rookie season. So the willingness is there to a much greater degree, which is excellent for the Sixers. But definitely those minutes without the two All-Stars on the floor, the Sixers will need Harris and Maxey to play very well. And it does seem like they're now leaning in that direction of that's how they're going to rotate things. And those two need to step up and be efficient and be aggressive and compensate for some of the natural deficiencies when you're subbing your team that way. I thought Harris, played a tremendous first half.
Yes.
I believe he started 7 for 8 from the floor, but even just outside of the makes, just the self-belief was there in abundance. And I like that Doc Rivers and his teammates kept getting him the ball in spots where he could attack. I think Rivers, obviously, like all coaches, has weaknesses and faults, but that has been an upgrade compared to the Brett Brown era. Like he's good at recognizing when his player has a favorable matchup or is hot or just needs touches, and he rides that over and over again. And Harris, rewarded him for that faith. It was a big reason the Sixers went on that run, went up 15 points, and then unfortunately, didn't produce that much in the second half of that game. So the Sixers, against a high quality opponent, probably need that sort of thing from him in both halves, and they need Maxey to shoot a little bit better, and they need to avoid costly turnovers, and the margin for error is low when you're playing the Phoenix Suns, and an off shooting night from Maxey is the type of thing you typically can't afford to have. You need a little more from your complementary pieces, especially when one of the stars shoots 2 for 11. When that's the case, and Maxey 7 for 21, it's just a lot to overcome. Heading into this game, the Suns had scored 125 or more in every outing in the 7-game winning streak. So the Sixers, relative to that, had a nice defensive effort, but they couldn't, pull a win out of it because their own players had some off shooting nights and just didn't do enough in terms of the necessary firepower in this game.
Doc Rivers wasn't very pleased after this one, and Joel Embiid echoed those sentiments. Are we seeing them better on the defensive end, though? Are you seeing more from them regarding the transition defense that was so bad? I mean, this 3-game road trip, a 2-1 trip, you'll take it. I mean, you lose to the Phoenix Suns, you beat the teams you were supposed to beat, you were in this game. But I think we've seen them play a little bit of zone over these past couple of games. We've seen them improve, as you said, in some areas in the transition defense. He wasn't very pleased with the Lakers game and their defense, which is, obvious reasons. No Anthony Davis, no LeBron James. They give up over 120 points. The Clippers game, hit or miss, but have you seen them making strides there on the defensive end?
I think it's like with all areas of this team where there's inconsistency. Mm-hmm. Booker scored 22 points in first quarter. Many of those, as you said, were not the fault of the Sixers. They were Booker making tough shots, but some of it was the Sixers just not being great, not being precise on that end of the floor. I mean, we haven't discussed it yet, but I think a key aspect of the game last night is Matisse Thybulle only plays 16 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that is he picks up 2 fouls early in the third quarter, giving him 4 for the game. But then Doc Rivers leans on Danny Green the rest of the way. I didn't think Green did a bad job on Booker, but Thybulle, an all-defensive team selection, not playing down the stretch is notable, and it's a tough decision, I think, night after night for Rivers of how to close that game and who's the 5th guy. And Thybulle has at times made it easy for him when he's contributing offensively and being disruptive defensively, but checked neither of those boxes last night. And then also, put himself in foul trouble. I think probably two or even 3 of the fouls were, fair enough. Okay, it just happens in the course of the game. But then, one of those in that third quarter, Tobias Harris has Booker well covered, and Thybulle just freelances and tries to block a jump shot and fouls him. And then that gives him 4 fouls. And, that's a big deal because you're a great defensive player, and you're putting your team in a tough position when you do that. So I think obviously Thybulle is a key piece of the Sixers defense. He's the team's best weapon against perimeter stars, but the reliability night to night is not there. And that probably is a factor in the defense not consistently being great.
Yeah, you could say that, the Sixers needed offense. So Matisse was on the bench because he's not a great offensive player, but they had closed the gap. And then there was an opportunity for maybe to reinsert Matisse. And, you talk about those fouls and the plays that he made. And, some of them, I don't see him learning to adapt to the way the game's called or how the refs are reffing the game, because he constantly reaches in instances where maybe just playing straight up, hands in their face defense is the best you're going to do. Like you mentioned, him trying to block that jump shot. He was maybe frustrated from seeing Booker make so many other shots that he thought that, this was one he was going to get because maybe he didn't, Booker wouldn't expect Matisse to try to block it or whatever. But I mean, those risks just aren't really worth it in the long run, because him, trying to rear view contest the guy that he played really aggressive D on, and then putting the onus on the referee to blow the whistle or not, he's not getting the benefit of the doubt in those situations. And it's really hurting the Sixers in some instances because he's not on the floor when it matters, or he's picked up all these fouls and has to sit on the bench. So I'm looking for more from Matisse in that regard. He's also one of those up and down guys, and you see him contribute more some games because of the transition buckets or opportunities he might get, and then he's on the bench with only playing 16 minutes. So this is just one of those things that they're going to have to play out over these next few games and into the postseason. But suddenly, they drop from the number 1 seed for one day down to, 4th in the Eastern Conference, with the Celtics overtaking the top spot. So, these games finishing out the regular season are going to be important. They're going to have to balance resting their stars and getting more from their reserves in order to maintain, a top 4 seeding here. I mean, numbers wise, it may be difficult for them to fall out of the top 4 based on the 5th and 6th seeds, how close they are. But at the same time, this is a team that needs the momentum. They need to be playing well. They need to continue to build the camaraderie to continue to grow and mature and be championship ready.
Absolutely. And there've been a lot of positives in that regard before last night. Even Thybulle, I think, deserves credit for being excellent on both ends against the Clippers. And there being overall, I think, a positive trend with his offensive contributions alongside Harden, and him at least seeming threatening enough to opposing defenses that they can't entirely disregard him on the floor. But, last night was a big step back and a reminder that dependability is just not something that he exudes. But look, this final stretch of 8 games, the Sixers schedule, this is according to Tankathon, is the 3rd easiest in the NBA. And you imagine it'll get even a little bit easier after they play the Bucks on Tuesday. They play, Welling-ish teams. Yeah. They play Indiana twice. They play Detroit twice. A lot of winnable games on the schedule. Sure looks like they're going to be a top 4 seed and that they will host a first round series. And it's just a question of what the matchups will be. The Boston Celtics, continue to rise and have the East's best record over the last 3 months and are not a team you want to face in round 1. But I think outside of that, as opposed to are the Sixers the 2nd seed, or are they the 3rd seed, it's the bigger question is how they're trending, heading into the postseason, and most importantly, who they play.
We're going to take a time out here in the Sixers Talk podcast. We'll come back and talk a little bit about this Bucks matchup. And as we take a break, you can talk amongst yourselves about the Will Smith, Chris Rock situation. We'll be right back.
Start college, build skills, and complete your degree with Wilmington University. 100% online options and affordable tuition makes WilMU work for you. Learn more at wilmu.edu.
Noah, we have seen the rotations change a bit. We saw the Paul Reed show return a bit, and we saw a breakaway dunk from him that was very easy breezy compared to that reverse he tried to pull off last month in February. But they're tinkering with the rotations a bit, Noah. We see Shake Milton's emergence kind of return as he's sooner off the bench, and he's trying to make the most of it by putting shots up and, playing his best defense. Are you pleased with the way that Doc has kind of changed the rotations and who's on the floor with whom?
I think, as we said, experimentation is logical, and I think overall
we hadn't seen a whole lot of that, though. We hadn't seen a departure from, Niang, DeAndre Jordan, and then maybe, someone else, coming off the bench there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We'll see what he settles on. Last night was not a Furkan Korkmaz game. Sixers only went with 9, and it's clear that he doesn't trust a ton of pieces on this bench night after night. I think Danny Green, a veteran, is in that category, and DeAndre Jordan continues to be someone who gets minutes every single game, like it or not. That seems to be the case. I don't know if there have been any dramatic bench related takeaways for me, other than just it feels more and more like we're leaning in this direction of he likes Harden and Embiid sharing the floor, and he's hopeful that Maxey and Harris carry the team without those guys. I think if you're really straining for positives, the Harris Jordan pick and roll showed a little bit of promise last night. Maybe those two develop a little chemistry, and Harris figures a little of, this is where DeAndre can be most dangerous, or this is how I want him to set screens for me, or how we can time things so that his screens free me up for mid-range shots, and those sort of little nuances. I again think there's a lot of reasons to be skeptical about the DeAndre Jordan minutes and whether they can go okay for the Sixers in the postseason, but it does feel like we're trending in that direction. Where
he seems to have one play every game where you're like, oh, he still has a little bit left. Like he catches a oop, or there's a nice rebound or something, outlet pass. It's something that he just contributes, and you like. I think he had a nice alley-oop dunk in this one that I'm thinking of this last game against Phoenix. But the non-Embiid minutes, I think we're going to call that NE M, like the non-Embiid men. Like we're gonna acronym that and make it like something we reference on future podcasts. But difficult, man, and you kind of project some of this road trip into what the Sixers will bring Tuesday. Better road team than home team, but that gap has closed a little bit. And we look at this Bucks team who is right there with the Sixers fighting for the 1 seed, the defending champs. And the Bucks come into town as a great measuring stick once again for the 76ers. No practice today as they bounce back from traveling on the West Coast. Are you thinking that the Sixers are ready for this matchup against Phoenix, particularly with Joel Embiid's ankle? Do you think that's a lingering issue, or how do you anticipate things shaping up Tuesday?
Yeah, well, they thought he was good to go for the rest of the game, and we know they would have been cautious if that was not the case. Yeah,
we saw him favoring it. We saw him a bit ginger.
Yeah, still pretty productive in that fourth quarter. So yeah, we'll see what the injury report brings us as always, assuming he's good to go. Obviously, it's notable this is the first time the Sixers will see Brook Lopez this season, missed most of the year with a back injury, and now he's back in that lineup and is a key piece of a Milwaukee defense that had disappointed this year without him. So yeah, it'll be an interesting matchup. Milwaukee's coming off a blowout loss to Memphis, so you figure they are motivated to get back on track and to beat a team that they might face in the postseason. I always think these matchups late in the year are a little awkward because though no one wants to say it, like some coaches don't love to show all of their cards and to give a team a taste of exactly what they're going to be facing in the postseason. So that's a component of it. Not to say that the teams will be giving anything besides full effort or will be trying to lose the game, but obviously everyone brings their A game in the playoffs from a coaching and playing side, and that's maybe not the case when you're facing each other late in the regular season and you've got playoff spots locked up and all of that. But yeah, should be a good one. Sixers played an awesome game the last time they faced Milwaukee. Paul Millsap was pretty good in that game. Joel Embiid was, of course, brilliant. And we saw two MVP candidates dueling down the stretch. So perhaps we'll get that again. The last time, Embiid faced another contender in this MVP race, the Sixers lost to Denver, but just from an entertainment standpoint, it was a great watch. And hopefully we get that again with Embiid versus the Greek Freak.
A bit of breaking news here into the Sixers Talk podcast. Shams Charania tweeting that Robert Williams, one of the Celtics' best defenders, has possibly a torn meniscus, they fear. So that definitely will shake up how they play basketball and their stranglehold on that top seed. Everyone's dealing with stuff right now. I'm sure that's a blow that they didn't expect and will definitely change the way they play. But good teams make, the most out of those opportunities. I don't anticipate them, backing down. And if you talk about Coach of the Year, Ime Udoka would be in the conversation possibly as well. But the Celtics, do they scare you at all considering this injury? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, maybe fear is a little bit strong, but I still feel confident in the stance that you don't want to face Boston early in the playoffs. Hot team that's figured a heck of a lot out and
it's blowing people out, man.
Yeah, it's great defensive group, but that injury hurts, and you hope for Robert Williams' sake, that it's not severe and he can return ASAP. Al Horford will probably carry a significant role for that Boston team, the interior defense. So that will quite obviously be a major storyline if the Sixers and the Celtics end up squaring off. But good team in a lot of areas, just like the Suns. There's a lot of ways they can beat you, and I think that's not a desirable first round matchup for anyone in the East still.
We will be here every step of the way with you, and we will rejoin you on Wednesday with more from the Sixers Talk podcast. Noah, anything you're working on the website that people should know about?
Yeah, not a ton to note. Yeah, as you mentioned, had the observations on the last game. Yeah, we'll have a home shoot around tomorrow, so we'll have coverage of that and storylines heading into the Sixers Bucks matchup. And yeah, looking forward to that duel, the Embiid Giannis duel. Yeah, hopefully it didn't sound like I was, trying to say that game was meaningless or anything. Just trying to acknowledge the realities of these coaches are very cagey and savvy, and you can't put stuff past them in terms of not trying to show certain things or trying to be deceptive with the playoffs in mind. But no doubt both teams will care a lot about that game, and it'll be a fun one to watch.
We will be sure to join you on Wednesday with more from that. A packed house at the Wells Fargo Center for Tuesday's matchup for sure. For Noah Levick, I'm Danny Pommells, Ben Berry, our producer extraordinaire. We appreciate you listening to the Sixers Talk podcast, brought to you by Wilmington University. Wilmington works.